Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In my last video I talked about what to do when you feel like quitting. I've had to go back and really look at what my goals are for the next few months, for the next year or so. I've gone back and reflected, taking a break off of just this burnout that I felt. And I've also tried something new. I've been wanting to try to make bread at home for a while now, and I was finally able to do it. I think it turned out really good, so I thought I'd share that with you. As many of you know, I've lost over 60 pounds over the past few years, and in doing so, I've learned a lot about how important the food you consume is and how important the ingredients that go into that food are as well. I've learned a lot about what I can eat and what makes me feel good, what helps me feel better, and what foods make me feel worse. A lot of times it has to do with the ingredients that are in the food. So bread is one of those things that have a ton of ingredients in them. It was really difficult for me to find good breads that didn't have all the extra canola oil or other seed oils and all these extra chemicals and all this stuff. If I eat too much processed bread, I notice that I start to feel a little more bloated. My fingers kind of feel swollen. So I decided to stop eating bread until I found some at the farmer's market. And then I also found pretty good bread at Sprouts. Their sourdough bread isn't too bad. But I wanted to try to make some bread at home. I have a friend that made bread at home and hers came out really good. So I found a recipe on Pinterest and here I am making it. It was pretty easy to make and it turned out really good. It's 4 ingredients. It's flour, yeast, salt, and warm water. For this recipe, you take a 1.5 cups of warm water, add it to a bowl, and then you add in a packet of yeast as well as 1/2 tablespoon of salt. Whisk that all together until the salt and the yeast are dissolved. From there, you add 3¼ cups of flour. If you decide to try this recipe or try to make bread at home, please let me know and let me know how it turns out for you. I really liked how it turned out. Alvin and my family really liked how it turned out. I made a garlic butter to put on it one night and it was delicious. Once that's added in, you stir that all together until it's all mixed up. The dough was pretty sticky, so I did use a silicone spatula to scrape the dough off the wooden spoon. Once that's all mixed together, I set it aside and let it rise for about 2 to 3 hours. Though being mostly animal-based, I do avoid most processed foods, but I've done a lot of experimenting with the foods that I eat as well. I was eating keto. I've cut out vegetables. I'll eat more vegetables. I'll see how I feel after eating different foods. And based off of that, I found that I feel my best eating mostly animal-based. But I wanted to try making this bread at home and just seeing how I feel afterwards, if it makes a huge difference, if I still feel good. And I did still feel good. So, yeah. So while I let the bread rise, I did go and run some errands. I worked out, and then I came back. When I came back, I turned the oven on to 450 and I let it heat up. I put the Dutch oven in there to heat up as well, and I let it sit in there for about 30 minutes after the oven reached 450. To form the loaf, I took a piece of parchment paper, sprinkled some flour on it, and then I used my silicone spatula to scrape the dough onto the parchment paper. I used the spatula to help me form the loaf as well. Form it enough to make an oval circle-ish shape that'll fit into the Dutch oven, but when I was reading the instructions, it said not to mess with it too much, otherwise it'll change the texture of the bread. So then I grabbed the corner of the paper, used that to help me flip the bread to the center of the paper, And then I took the Dutch oven out, placed the dough on the inside, and I put the lid back on. Then I put the whole Dutch oven back into the oven for about 35 minutes. After 35 minutes, I took the lid off and I let it cook in the oven with the lid off for about 5 to 10 minutes until the bread was like a nice golden brown. Once done holding the parchment paper, I took the bread out of the Dutch oven and placed it onto a cutting board. I let it sit for about 10 minutes and then I cut into it. It was crunchy on the outside and nice and fluffy on the inside. We loved it. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you next time. Take care.